On September 26, 1983, Soviet early warning systems reported 5 incoming American missiles. Excuse me. Stanislav Petrov, the soldier on duty, was required to report it up the chain, which very likely would have triggered a retaliatory launch. He had minutes to decide, and mostly on gut instinct, concluded that a real first strike wouldn't come as just 5 missiles. So he didn't report it, and he was correct. The system had mistaken sunlight reflecting off of high-altitude clouds for missile engines. Petrov is sometimes called the soldier who saved the world, and he did so in part by purposely waiting under enormous pressure to act. 20 centuries earlier, a landowner made the same call. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like someone who planted good seed in his field. While people were sleeping, an enemy came and planted weeds among the wheat and went away. When the stalks sprouted and bore again, then the weeds also appeared. The servants of the landowner came and said to him, "Master, didn't you plant good seed in your field? Then how is it that it has weeds?" "An enemy has done this," he answered. The servants said to him, "Do you want us to go and gather them?" But the landowner said, "No, because if you gather the weeds, you'll pull up the wheat along with them. Let both grow side by side until the harvest. And at harvest time, I'll say to the harvesters, first gather the weeds and tie them together in bundles to be burned, but bring the wheat into my barn." Well, it's likely that the weed the author's writing about is a ryegrass known as darnel. While growing, it's virtually indistinguishable from wheat. Now, farmers have to wait until harvest to tell them apart. Only then can they be unentangled. Darnel is actually 2 organisms braided into one plant. Ancient people burned it because it harbored a poisonous fungus, making it inedible. Yet, it also made a pretty good substitute for firewood. And in the 1st century, wood was hard to come by in the ancient Near East. So farmers burned darnel for practical, not vengeful reasons. That hasn't stopped many people, including the anonymous author of the Gospel of Matthew, from grabbing a single horrifying metaphor. The bad seed is burned in Gehenna, in hell. But that's not what's going on here. What we do to plants is not what we do to humans. Also, the darnel is burned for being bad, but it's not bad as morally reprehensible. It's simply inedible, poisonous, and useless as food. But in the desert, the poison that couldn't be baked into bread became the fire that kept people alive. Fire also isn't inherently bad. The problem concerns who picks up the match and why. A fire lit from need warms a house. A fire lit from contempt only wants something erased. The parable in verses 24 to 30 actually predates Matthew's gospel. The underlying concept that harvest is judgment with the wicked burned while the faithful are gathered safely is an ancient attitude that still carries unfortunate weight today. That's partly because the posture appears in so many places. It's in Malachi, in Joel, Hosea, it's in the Psalms. It's centuries of Israel picturing God's justice through the oldest technologies available: earth, wind, and fire. But what follows the parable in verses 36 to 43 is generally thought to be the original work of whoever it is that wrote Matthew. It's an addition layered on to that ancient agrarian image. And Matthew's commentary reflects the fears of a community estranged from its place of worship and cut off from family members for thinking differently and following the Jesus way. Jesus left the crowds and went into the house. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." Jesus replied, "The one who plants the good seed is the human one. The field is the world, and the good seeds are the followers of the kingdom. But the weeds are the followers of the evil one. The enemy who planted them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the present age. The harvesters are the angels. Just as people gather weeds and burn them in the fire, so it will be at the end of the present age. The human one will send his angels, and they'll gather out of his kingdom all things that cause people to fall away and all people who sin. He'll throw them into a burning furnace. People there will be weeping and grinding their teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in their Father's kingdom. Those who have ears should hear." Matthew. This is not a prediction of the future. Nothing in the Bible is fortune telling. Matthew's commentary is simply an age-old tale about the human propensity to separate ourselves into packs and then decide that all the other packs are wrong, life-threatening, and need to burn in hell. We've all done it in one form or another. Humans are really good at being mean and building fiery furnaces. The parable, not Matthew's commentary, claims that our vigilante instinct is a mistake. It causes us to miss incredible new things standing, in the case of Jesus in the first century, literally right in front of us. And it is that vigilante instinct that makes us want to burn things in a furnace rather than recognizing we are as entangled with what we want to burn as the roots of darnel and wheat. Matthew's congregation was a frightened mix of Jews and Gentiles, desperate to know that they were the wheat in the story, that their faith in Jesus had not been misplaced, especially since their friends and family were telling them they were all going to Gehenna. And even though that is not what the parable is about, the community's grief and hope adapted it to that end. The fear possessing Matthew's congregation caused them to look across the field at those same friends and family members and say, "We're not the weeds, you're the weeds." So now we're all accusing each other of being weeds. But weeds are formed from the essence of God too, so they're substantially no different from wheat. If we contend that God is in all things as a conscious essence, simultaneously experiencing all forms of being, then even the stuff we want to burn in the furnace is God, which is exactly why the loss is real when we burn it. What's destroyed isn't just a bunch of matter. It's a relationship with a part of God that we choose to sever from ourselves. That's why we grieve. The people most certain they're wheat, most eager to spot the darnel and deal with it, are doing exactly what the text pins on the followers of the evil one. The rush to sort it out ourselves. The certainty that we're included while everybody else is out. That's the darnel. The two plants don't represent saved Jesus followers and everybody else who's condemned. Whatever the author believed, the community needed a clear answer about their new faith. They needed to feel safe. So strip away the grief of separation, the desire for affirmation, and perhaps even absolution, and the darnel and the fire become comfort on a cold night as the God field quietly reclaims what it grew. God becomes God becomes God. By the time a farmer can tell wheat from darnel, the two have already grown into each other. They're not growing side by side, but through one root system that's so tangled that pulling out one pulls out both. That's not a detail the parable mentions in passing. That's why the landowner says, wait in the first place. He's being patient because he knows what's gestating. That braided root system is what God is. Every purge, even those we unfortunately see today, runs on the same tired idea that some of us are discreet enough to be lifted out of the dirt clean without pulling the rest of us up with them. That is foolish. We are not separate. We are more than 8 billion people rooted in the same living system. Whatever we see on the surface, our roots are already entangled. Pull the one we've decided is darnel, and we're going to feel it in our own ground too. We are entangled. Hate doesn't protect the granary or purify the field. It just wants another instance of God to suffer and disappear. But because we are entangled root through root, that fire never reaches only its target. Whatever we burn in our own ground too. So we need to understand that nobody who lights a fire to erase something thinks they're wrong for doing it. Inquisitors thought they were saving souls. The people who build furnaces believe every time that they're protecting the granary. But you don't build a furnace to protect a granary. You build one because you want a furnace. The furnace builders don't want to hear this, but burning darnel doesn't eradicate it anyway. We cannot make any part of God cease to exist. The carbon goes into the soil, the minerals return to the ground that grew it, and next season it all rises again as wheat or as darnel or as whatever the field decides to make them. Nothing is destroyed in that fire. Nothing has ever been destroyed in any fire because matter and energy are never destroyed, only transformed. Forever. Which brings us back to a farmer standing in a field telling his workers to set down the sickle. He never promised the darnel would turn out to be wheat. He never said the field was poison-free. He simply said, wait, you cannot not pull out one without tearing the other. The harvest is not yours to rush, and the sorting is not yours to do. The parable says wait. The author's commentary on it says burn. Both of those ideas are there in the 13th chapter of Matthew, side by side. F. Scott Fitzgerald said, the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. One should, for example, be able to see that things are hopeless and yet be determined to make them otherwise. That determination can come from choosing to see that God is all of us, and then recognizing God in each other as we walk around the neighborhood until we no longer feel the need to sort. Amen. Our question to think about today is where in our lives we've already decided who the weeds are.